So going into 2020, there are a lot of things that you need to pay attention to on the marketing side that are very important as it relates to your branding, your tactical approach, a lot of different elements to make what you're doing be complete. But we want to talk about a little bit of a checklist of things that you need to make sure happen on an annual basis at least to make sure that all of your properties stay live, your website stays live and functioning appropriately. So we're going to start out with the website itself. On your primary website, you want to make sure that your domain is not scheduled to expire, or if it is scheduled to expire, that you have auto renewal set up. If you have your own domain and you manage it yourself, or whomever manages it, you want to extend the life of that domain for as long as possible anyway. So this really needs to turn into something that's not an annual thing, but something that you still check on annually. So I would prepay your domain for the next 10 to 20 years at least. Really as long as you can, as long as your service provider will allow you to. It's not going to increase the price, but it is going to communicate longevity of your ownership and your interest in the brand. At least on an annual basis, make sure that your SSL certificates are renewed, paid up. Again, extend these out as long as you like. You don't want them to expire. You don't want your website to sit with an expired SSL certification, because then it's going to show a security issue. Any other plugins, any other software that you're using for your website, make sure that those are renewed and updated on at least a yearly basis. Again, where you can get multiple years, you usually want to prepay those. The exception is going to be services that you may move away from. So what I'm talking about more specifically are the things that make up the functionality of your site. So plugins on the back end as opposed to services, something like professional LinkedIn or something like that. Make sure those things stay up to date, because if they don't, then you can miss important updates, you can have security issues that you don't anticipate and that you'll need to work around. Another thing as we move on into 2020 that we want to take a really close look at, and hopefully we've already been taking a look at, but I know a lot of organizations are just starting to think about this, is accessibility. So do you have different things on your website that allow people who are colorblind, who are visually impaired, or who have other issues related to navigating a website? Are there ways for them to get to your information? So a significant portion of the American population has some form of a challenge as it relates to working on a website. You want to make sure that your website can service those people as well. Now in the past, that's been something that made good business sense. Pretty soon that's going to be something that's required from the government as well. So take a look at your site, try to get it to be as compliant as possible in those areas. 2020 is a great year to start really making an effort to do that because we can see through some lawsuits that have made it through even the Supreme Court. This is turning into a very serious issue. It's always been a serious issue, but now is a great time. If you haven't done it, take a look, see what you can do to make your website more accessible. You also want to take a look at what your content is and what your content plan is. So it's a good time to take a look at some of the older content that you have on your website. What just doesn't make sense anymore? Are there some things that are now factually inaccurate because the laws change, because they're just outdated, because new science has outdated some of the things that we've claimed before? What we don't want to do is have a search result show up with inaccurate information. So now's a good time to take a look backwards and say, are we reflecting really who we are as an organization and the things that we've said? Are we accurate? And then do we have a plan going into the year looking forward to say, this is our plan to populate good content on our website, content that's going to engage people, that people are going to want to read and share. And then what's the cadence of that? And we find that dipping too far below a blog about every week or so doesn't deliver anywhere near the results that posting something at least about once a week does, as long as that posting once a week is something that really contains some valuable information. So you want to have a plan to maintain that cadence and have the systems in place to make sure that you do that in an ongoing way. Along with that, coming up with a cadence for social media posting, we like to use kind of a rule of thirds. So about a third of your content can be self-promotional, and that's fine, but retain about a third of that content to be about kind of the community, about people who work for you, things that really impact people in your orbit, the community in your orbit. And then a third of that can be educational content. So come up with a plan that utilizes your editorial calendar content on your social media calendar as well. And you can plan around different events that you know are coming up through the year, holidays, special days, events, things like that, that can align those events with the content that you're creating. A few things I think are going to stay relatively constant going into 2020. On the paid advertising side, we've seen a lot of success on Facebook and Instagram, also on LinkedIn. Programmatic is going to continue to get smarter, so you're going to be able to serve more appropriate ads to a more active and ready to purchase or ready to make a decision audience. So I think we'll see some improvements there. We've been seeing AI kind of step into different areas on the paid advertising side. We're going to continue to see that grow. So when you look at your strategy on the paid side, what are the tools that are coming out? What is Google producing, for example, that you're going to be able to utilize to better serve up ads, to better target those ads, and to better manage those spends? So now's a good time of the year to really take a look back at 2019 and say what worked and what didn't work. What new tools do we have in 2020 that can help those be more effective? And then how can we modify the content and the structure of those campaigns to really make them work more effectively? We've seen a lot of ads showing up in competitor spaces, whether that's been purposeful or not. Oftentimes we've seen that it's not purposeful, but Google recognized what the category is and so serves up ads. So you might want to take a look and take some time to add negative keywords around your competition if that's the type of environment that you work in. We find that a lot of times in certain industries there's a willingness to kind of stay away from competitors' brands, and so you can do that by adding negative keywords around those brands. Depending on your industry, depending on the area of the country you work in, those may have an impact. Now's a great time to take a look at some of those details. We're going to see email marketing continue to become more diverse in terms of content by audience. So we have tools now that allow us to programmatically serve up different content to different audience based on their user behavior, based on their preferences and things that we know about them in our system. So we're going to see that continue to expand. We're going to be able to make sure that we're delivering the correct message to the correct audience at the correct time more effectively than we have been able to in the past. So we can create rule sets. There's going to be an AI element in some of those that really helps us craft the messaging, customize the messaging without a tremendous amount of oversight from a human. So we're going to see that segmentation and that messaging continue to improve. The end result is a more effective marketing message because the right message is hitting the right person at exactly the right time. When it comes to lead generation and nurturing, we're going to continue to see some of the same entities that are kind of pursuing that. We've seen an increase in organizations who exist just solely to capture and deliver potential leads. We see that a lot in the legal industry. We've seen that a lot in a lot of other industries as well. So an entity is created. The purpose of the entity is to get that lead to sign some sort of a document that ties that lead to that entity, which can then be sold to an end user firm, for example, like on the law firm side. So I think we'll continue to see that as certain marketing agencies start to really specialize in those areas. There's some inherent challenges to those initiatives though as well. One of those being that when a lead pops up, it may or may not be a signed lead that gets sold to the end party, right? So where it's not a signed lead, the challenge is that now instead of just taking the time for someone in your office to reach out to that lead, it has to make it through their system, make it to your system. That payment has to happen somewhere in there. And then you still have that limited period of time to follow up and try to close that lead. So where you can directly attract and capture those leads and then nurture those leads in-house, I think you're still better off. We've seen this trend kind of begin several years ago, but we always get pretty mixed reviews. Now there's some bigger names out there that are doing it, but we're still kind of hearing that same story of by the time the lead makes it to the client, it's probably less of a warm lead, a little bit borderline on a cold lead. And that makes sense because that lead doesn't have exposure to your brand. They have exposure to a message that got them to convert and supply their information, but that doesn't mean that they're going to ultimately be a good fit for your company. They may not think you're a great fit for them because they haven't had that exposure to your brand yet. So you have to really start at an earlier stage. So that makes that nurturing even more important. That nurturing is going to tie into some of the automation that we talked about a minute ago, where the more accurate and more accurately framed out that communication can be, the more effective it's going to be for your audience. This is not meant to be an exhaustive checklist, but just some things to think about going into this year. So there are some other things that you're going to want to spend a little bit of time thinking through. This is a great time of year to take some inventories around your collateral, your print pieces, signage that you have. Make sure that your brand is consistent across all of the elements. Brand creep can happen where you start out with a clean logo, clean identity elements, clean personas that you're talking to, but then in a presentation, your logo gets misused a little bit, and then somebody else grabs that same presentation, copies it, cleans it up, puts some new things in it, and it just starts to stray from the original design, the original layout. Your messaging starts to stray a little bit in these kind of repetitive pieces. So now's a good time to take inventory of what's out there, what's being used right now. What is your team using? Are they using kind of the canonical versions of that logo? Your branding elements, your messaging, and can you pull it back and regain some control of that? That should happen really throughout the life of a brand. It gets cleaned up and fixed up. It's especially important in print pieces because they go out and sometimes there's no way to bring them back. So it's a good time of year, as we reach the new year, as we go into 2020, to take a look, make sure that you're doing that. Also take a look at some of the scalability of your own efforts. So when you think of what your plan is for the upcoming year, is the growth that their success results in going to be scalable for you as an organization? So take a look at what those processes look like internally to say, can we take the successes that we're hoping for from our marketing campaigns and then turn those into mechanisms that are going to help your company be profitable and help you service those clients and those customers as effectively as possible. So thanks for taking a couple minutes to go through kind of our 2020 checklist. Again, we didn't mean this to be comprehensive, but we want to touch on some things that we see get forgotten oftentimes or missed, thrown on the wayside that can have some serious consequences for your business. But also, if you can be proactive about them, even though some of these things are small things, if you can be proactive about them, they can really give you a big advantage going into the new year.